A data point in and of itself is the speed at which a professional sports team's institutional issue progresses from internal documentation to national broadcast coverage. For weeks, the in-depth reporting of publications like this one served as the main source of analytical documentation of what was going on within the Indiana Fever Group. The sideline footage, the inconsistent press conference statements, the rotation management mistakes, and the CBA reporting infractions. That record surpassed a threshold this week. The organization's dilemma is no longer a topic of analytical discussion among the active fan base when Cheryl Miller appears on ESPN and does not back down. It has primetime television real estate and is a national mainstream sports story. Since the Portland reporting breach, the Indiana Fever front office has been trying to regulate the media infrastructure, but it has now completely escaped organizational containment. Welcome back. Here at WNBA Court, we're looking at the biggest institutional advancements of the past week in exact, music analytical order. The bench footage that compelled national coverage, the defensive isolation exploitation that the ESPN crew discovered, the roster construction criticism that Whitlock's reporting has brought into the public discourse, the ESPN segment, and what Cheryl Miller's willingness to speak publicly communicates about the league's internal temperature, and the front office social media behavior, and what it reveals about organizational crisis management capacity. These components can all be documented. When taken as a whole, they represent this season's most comprehensive one-week critique of an organizational system.
Today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and if they lose on Thursday, expect a big time going in from major networks. I'm talking Fox, ESPN, and it's already starting today because Cheryl Miller went on ESPN and she ain't hold nothing back. People been saying that they want Cheryl Miller to be the coach of the Fever. And we got Sue Bird getting in on the action as well. Not only that, we got
the choice made by Cheryl Miller to discuss the Indiana Fever predicament on ESPN is not a typical instance of media commentary. In the institutional structure of women's basketball, Miller holds a particular role. As a player, coach, broadcaster, and somebody whose reputation in the sport is independent of any existing organizational ties that would encourage moderation. When a person of that caliber appears on national television and speaks candidly about the dysfunction of a franchise, it conveys something particular about the internal consensus that develops among those who are most familiar with this sport. Without a level of internal conviction that warrants the exposure, public persons with Miller's institutional stature do not cause needless organizational conflict. Her readiness to speak reveals where the league's knowledgeable community has come in evaluating this circumstance. Given the current circumstances, the fan reaction demanding Miller's coaching engagement is emotionally reasonable. However, it is important to note analytically that the importance of her commentary is independent of any future organizational function. What counts is what her public portrayal of the circumstances conveys about the scope of the accountability consensus currently emerging around this franchise. Sue Bird's participation in the discussion expands that agreement into a second area of the institution. Bird is able to remark on organizational difficulties without the limitations that current players and league personnel must deal with thanks to her post-playing career platform. A qualitative aspect of the scrutiny this franchise is under is demonstrated by the public engagement of two individuals of that caliber with the same organizational predicament during the same music week.
Ago. Amber needs to do what Kelly did at this point, and that's leave the internet. If you can't stand in the kitchen, get out. It's too hot for you. The oven might burn your hand. That's how hot it is. And last summer in July, it was too hot for Kelly, and Kelly ain't been back on Twitter X since. Kelly, I don't even think Kelly got an Instagram no more. I mean, Kelly is gone. She might not even have Facebook. That's how bad the heat had got for her.
As an organizational crisis management decision rather than a personal social media choice, Amber Cox's reported blocking of Jason Whitlock and other media figures has to be analyzed. The action conveys specific information to the stakeholder audience watching it when an executive of a professional sports team that is currently the focus of national broadcast coverage of its dysfunction uses her official or publicly associated social media accounts to block journalists and commentators who are covering that dysfunction. It conveys that the organization's reaction to important external coverage is to limit its scope rather than interact with its content. It conveys that the executive in charge of the blocking action has determined that factual correction, when possible, is always the best crisis management response to false coverage, and that the criticism being blocked cannot be addressed through factual correction. Additionally, it conveys an organizational stance on responsibility that aligns with the reporting compliance behavior, public statement management, and press conference language patterns that this channel has tracked during the entire season. Cox is now following in the footsteps of Kelly Kroskop. An Indiana Fever executive's proven tendency to withdraw from public digital presence in response to pressure from fans and the media is not a result of a person's nature. It is a pattern of organizational culture. Because the culture allows and tacitly supports it, organizations whose leadership reacts to accountability pressure by restricting rather than engaging frequently exhibit that pattern. The blocking behavior is a sign of an organizational culture that lacks the institutional capability for open public accountability that this level of commercial professional sports demands.
You're saying what's happening in Indianapolis?
Right now, it's frustration, and unfortunately, it's boiling over, and it's being seen. It's one thing to have it behind closed doors, but when it spills over, and when the coach has to basically say, "Hey, you know what, Caitlin? Enough is enough. This is too disruptive." In and out. Take a seat. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's frustration. I'm not like the best lip reader, but I feel like Stephanie White did say defense a couple times.
Now,
national broadcast audiences are currently being introduced to this organizational issue mostly through the narrative framework of the ESPN piece, which frames the season arc as a 4-2 start followed by successive defeats and a 16-point blowout defeat to a first-year expansion squad. Because it shows that the roster's talent level is capable of winning, the 4-2 start provides pertinent background. The ensuing collapse provides significant context because it demonstrates that the organizational and structural elements that have caused the losing streak cannot be reversed by talent alone. The organizational record and the game film both accurately describe structural failure leading to losses, talent present, and framing. The casual national sports audience is now viewing the Indiana Fever season through this prism due to its participation in ESPN's primetime coverage. Press conference language and social media banning are insufficient to address the organizational communication problem this causes for the front office. Results and proven behavioral change are the only ways to manage it. At the moment, neither of those are visible. Analytical restraint is needed when interpreting White's bench conversation with Clark through lip reading. A trustworthy standard for evidence is lip reading from broadcast footage. The visual description of the interaction, the physical closeness, the obvious emotional intensity of the coaching staff's communication posture, and Clark's obvious reaction to it can all be recorded without that ambiguity. The video has those components. The visual record that is currently accessible cannot be used to corroborate the particular words, and responsible analysis does not give interpretations that cannot be verified as reality. A sideline interaction whose visual character is consistent with the pattern of coaching staff Clark encounters that have been documented throughout numerous games this season is what the tape does dependably and without interpretive uncertainty document. Is the component that is important for analysis. Within it, individual interactions are manifestations of that pattern.
The video, and I said, Stephanie White said, "Get the F out my face." If you guys read her lips, she definitely swerved at Caitlin, like cursed at her, bro. It looked that way. Now, I could be wrong. I very much could be wrong. But it definitely looked like she's cursing at Caitlin Clark, scolding her almost like she's a damn child. And if I'm Caitlin Clark, mom, I am pissed. I am pissed. I damn near want to have a conversation with Kelly off the record. Don't you ever talk to my daughter like that. If I'm Mr. Clark, don't you ever in your mind think about you finna talk to my...
Regardless of the exact words used, the description of White's sideline communication posture toward Clark presents an issue of workplace behavior that the Indiana Fever ownership is legally required to assess. Professional sports teams are places of employment. There is no clear distinction between the conduct norms governing managers' interactions with employees in any professional setting and those governing coaching staff's interactions with players. The company that employs both parties has a documented duty to react when that communication is visibly recorded on several occasions in a way that a reasonable observer would describe as inappropriate in terms of proximity, intensity, and obvious emotional dysregulation. The footage that the national television audience has seen has now been shown to the owning group. Their assessment of it is a documented organizational decision in and of itself, as is the organizational decision that evaluation results in or does not result in.
Mitchell kind of chimed in and said, like, you need to go stand over here and let us just regain the calm and when it becomes that disruptive to the entire team, somebody has to step in.
Well, that's my question for both of you, because you've played on teams where they're high.
So Kelsey Mitchell definitely got in on it, told her to go stand over there. Bro, what? Kayla need to get the hell out of Indy, bro.
Expectations, you know what that pressure can be like. Are these moments actually impacting?
The same evidentiary limitation that applies to the lip-reading question also applies to the stated Kelsey-Mitchell bench interaction, in which Mitchell is described as guiding Clark away from rather than toward the conflict. Music. Broadcast footage alone cannot verify the precise nature of bench exchanges during live game scenarios. The stated interaction raises a more general question about team dynamics that may be investigated analytically. A professional basketball team's competitive cohesiveness. The visibility and management of internal friction have a direct impact on the trust architecture that results in collective defensive commitment, transition execution, and late-game decision-making. Regardless of the particulars of any individual interaction, the team's competitive cohesion has a documented external perception problem when bench exchanges between teammates during live game moments are taken nationally as manifestations of internal division. The present organizational record indicates that the coaching staff and front office are not doing a good job of managing that perception, and the underlying reality it may or may not reflect. The analytical aspect of this scenario with the most clear, and actionable competitive implications is the defensive isolation exploitation that ESPN's team discovered. It is possible to document the pattern. Clark can be targeted in isolation situations to cause foul trouble and physical exhaustion, according to opposing teams. The first team to use this strategy consistently was the Golden State Valkyries. Now, every WNBA coaching staff has access to the game tape from those games. It has now been accepted as a league-wide model. Music. It is no coincidence that Clark has had foul issues in several recent games, including the 5-fall performance in Portland. The Fever's coaching staff hasn't yet created a reliable answer to this foreseeable result of a planned defensive strategy. There are 2 requirements for the counter that fall under the design authority of the coaching staff. Clark's catch points are altered by the first off-ball screening action, which involves receiving the ball in motion off screens as opposed to remaining still as an isolation target. Second, when isolation targeting is taking place, rotational defensive assistance minimizes her one-on-one exposure. These 2 choices relate to system design. Neither calls for staff that the Fever does not have. They need a coaching staff that has identified the opponent's blueprint and created a targeted counterattack. The analytical charge is the lack of that response in several games.
Yeah, I got to go look at it. So then he went on to say, these 4 women put the alphabet mafia agenda above basketball business. Your personal life should be your personal life. It should not be your business. These 4 women think fans are watching and paying thousands of dollars for tickets to see them, not Caitlin Clark. That's a problem. Exactly, bro. Those 4 women are the culprit behind what we're seeing take place in Indianapolis. And what's crazy is that court size tickets is like $2-3 grand right now. Like, I ain't gonna lie to you, bro. I've been looking. They're like $2-3 grand.